You're listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert.
Welcome listeners to this relaunch of the 3 Feet Radio Show. I am Luke Herbert, and joining me in the studio is my co-host and noted netball journalist Ben Carbonaro. How are you today, Ben?
Very well, Luke, and I must say it's great to have 3 Feet Radio back on the air. I know due to personal issues you've had and moving house and what have you, and changes in my circumstances too, it's prevented us from going to air, but it's great to be back on air again.
Oh, it is, and at least at my end, I had a rather long transitional phase in my life which has come to an end, and I get to start things afresh across the board, including with 3 Feet Radio. So why don't you get us started, Ben, on what we're talking about in episode 1 of the 3 Feet Radio Show relaunched?
But yeah, or you could almost say edition 2 or type 2. Today we're going to look at the quality of umpiring the ANZ Championship, and this has come to a head once again from the fact that Keisha Grant, who plays for the Tactics, back in a recent ANZ Championship game was pushed offside, and it was called offside, and it ended up costing the Tactics the game. The Tactics lost by 1 goal, Luke.
Yeah, they did, and it caused quite a stir, and rightfully so. And I'm not an umpire basher, and I don't like to, and I won't single out individual umpires. And the only reason, and this incident gets singled out because it changed the result of the game, and that's unavoidable. But I don't want to particularly single out individual players either, because just before I go on any further, I think the listener has to understand, and I'm sure they do, that players play to the umpire's whistles and not the rules of the game.
They do.
You find that in just about any sport that is played. But yes, it's quite clear the standard of umpiring, at least on the New Zealand side of the ANZ Championship. It's nowhere near where it needs to be. And the only way to improve the quality is to invest in umpiring training and development, and you're going to have to pay the umpires in the same way that players are paid for their time. Otherwise, the problem's just only going to get worse.
I think there's one thing that you're forgetting here, Luke. It's the fact that what we do need in this ANZ competition for the umpiring to be probably more effective, if you might say that, is to have one Australian umpire and one New Zealand umpire doing every game, regardless of whether it's finals or not. Again, that all comes down to cost. But I mean, the amount of money they're making through Sky and through Fox, there surely would be some sort of funding available in order to do that.
Well, having one Australian and one New Zealand umpire doesn't improve the quality of the Kiwi umpire. I think it perhaps may make for a fairer umpiring wedge in trans-Tasman games. So I do think there's a merit in the idea that it needs to happen. But that said, it won't necessarily improve the quality of umpiring in New Zealand. Although I am willing to say that in all likelihood, the Australian umpires are better than their Kiwi counterparts in the ANZ Championship.
I think the reason why I suggested it would be a good idea to have, say, one Aussie umpire and one Kiwi umpire is because it might lead to probably more consistency in terms of interpretation, or more of a mix. Because at the moment, what we see is we often see a clash of interpretations, and teams having to adjust to the different styles of umpiring when they're travelling.
Well, and I thought so. Well, when you speak of interpretation, I think you're really onto something there, Ben. And one of the things that needs to be done as a part of a review of elite level umpiring in New Zealand from the ANZ Championship perspective, international umpiring, we'll leave alone for this show anyway, is that the interpretation of the rules do need to be looked at. There may not be a need for rewriting the rulebook wholesale, and we will come to proposed rule changes in netball in just a moment. But certainly I think there is room to look at how the rules are interpreted, because if we go back to that incident that we mentioned just previously, whereby Keisha Grant was contacted, and she, as a result of that contact, went offside and was penalised for doing so. Now, most people would say that was an incorrect call, but if for some reason it was correct, and I'm no way suggesting it was, then you have to look at how the rules are being interpreted, because that would just be absolutely silly.
That's right. I mean, I'll say interpretation, because one thing I've noticed is with the Australian umpires, they'll let a lot of things go. Whereas New Zealand umpires are almost very technical, and they'll pick up a lot more things, like little things. Say, for example, and I've mentioned this a couple of times as an example, a player's positional bib is flapping about. Australian umpires will let that go. But Kiwi umpires will stop the game altogether, and they'll try and they'll get that fixed. That's just one example But I'm sure there's others that you can think of or that you've seen in the past too, Luke.
Well, it's a whole can of worms because as a netball fan and someone who loves the ANZ Championship, I know if there's too much whistle in a game, it spoils the spectacle. But if too much gets let go, then again you have the same problem. So again, it's something else that really needs to be looked at as a part of the sort of in-depth review and investments that need to be made into umpiring in New Zealand. The investments I had just mentioned a moment ago, but aside from paying the umpires, yes, there may have to be some kind of panel that reviews the rules and who should be on that panel, who should, review the interpretation of the rules, who should develop elite level pathways for umpires, is a question we will have to examine on a future show. And Ben, I just sense that you're chomping to discuss the proposed rule changes in netball.
The 2-point goal system is probably the one that's most familiar to Aussies and Kiwis and Kiwis across the ditch as well, because it has been used in the Fast Five and the Netball World Series. I think it might add a bit of spice to games, and it would be even cooler if we could have it where we have a power quarter where every team nominates a quarter in which the goals they score is worth 2 or worth double.
Well, I have to stay open-minded to the 2-point goal. It has made an appearance in Fast Five. I'm very far from being convinced it's required, and I followed the debate via social media, Twitter and Facebook, and a number of people have pointed out it will give the umpires something else to police, which is the last thing that is needed right now. But yeah, I could see how a power quarter, that could be good for the game. I think, the rule about changes in the center circle where the player stands, given the pace of the elite level game is played today, I think that's a perfectly sound idea. So what's your take on the injury timeout changes that are proposed then?
I think the injury timeouts being reduced to 30 seconds is nothing short of ridiculous, Luke. I say ridiculous because what if a player is seriously injured or has to get treatment? We've seen it before. Sometimes we have to see not just a physio take them off, but sometimes a bench player will come out and help, or a second primary carer will come out and help. So the 30-second one I think is ridiculous. It needs to be more than 30 seconds. And also another part of that rule is the player who called the stoppage must leave the court or be involved in any positional changes. These timeouts are used tactics for tactics as well. So that's almost saying that these sort of timeouts can't be used for tactics anymore.
Well, injury timeouts have been misused by players for tactical reasons to slow their opponent's momentum since the Netball Cup days. I would like to see a rolling substitution bench or technical interchange bench brought in to replace injury timeout. Say give each team one change per quarter. Players injured after that, they simply have to come off straight away. Of course there has to be some discretion. If the players lens, glasses.
Contact lenses,
yes. Contact lenses come out, then okay, let them find it. They're not going to pull out their lenses to stop the game, I don't think. But
no.
Are there any rule changes, Ben, you would like to see that aren't being trialled?
Not that I can think of at the moment, although the rolling substitution one you've got is great because it therefore means it's one less thing the umpires have to police, and they wouldn't have to stop the game. The players can just come on and off quite seamlessly.
Yeah, you'd have to watch the interruption of the game in terms of how much time it took up, but I don't think it would be that difficult to implement. If it's worked in the shorter variation of the game, which we now call Fast Five, it should then work with the regular form of the game.
Actually, there has been one that has entered my head just now. Actually, I've had a bit of a bright spark here. I know, if I read correctly somewhere, this may have been trialled in England, and it was to get rid of the whistle after every goal.
I believe that may have tried when they originated the abbreviated version of the game, when they had the paddle sticks to signify someone was coming off the bench. But that, certainly, I think at the elite level you could do that. I'm not sure if there would be any issues down at the lower levels of the game. They're still played outside, out on courts where there's wind and other elements. It would be interesting to hear from the listener on that point. But while we're speaking of points, Ben, we're getting towards the business end of the ANZ Championship, and
we are, most certainly.
And we know that the tactics are definitely out of running for the top four.
You're not worried about that because you're now a Steel supporter.
Well, the Mystics are now out of running. I'm a tactic And a Steel supporter. I fly the flag for the South Island.
Yeah, but what about, and you only like the Steel because of Storm Purvis, Luke. Everyone knows that. Ha ha ha.
Oh, secrets revealed on air. That's just terrible.
No, it's funny. It's quite funny.
Oh dear, Ben. Oh, that's the last of my netball secrets lessons. But moving along, right, we exclude the Steel out of the running. They've been too inconsistent, particularly losing games and Invercargill. So, who's your top four, Ben?
At the moment, I can see it being the Melbourne Vixens, the Waikato Bay Appointing Magic, and the Swifts at this stage for a top three. But the top four, the fourth position, I think, is certainly very wide open still.
Yeah, the Pulse is still in the running. They beat the Magic last night. And for the benefit of listeners, it's been recorded on the 6th of May 2014, this program.
On a Tuesday?
Yeah, on a Tuesday, if you care that much about the time and day. But yes, the Pulse or the Swifts will likely take that top four place. I think the West Coast Fever are also out of the running, aren't they, Ben?
Yeah, they are. Once again, the Achilles heel for them has been their inability to win games away. And games they have won have been, at home, have been close ones. That's for sure.
So it's kind of like the opposite of the Steel. The Steel, excluding one or two results, have done better away from home.
Yeah, that's right.
Chicago, at least, than they have in front of their home fans. So it's backwards land for the Steel.
Yeah, although interestingly, we did see the Magic actually in a bit of a turn-up get beaten last round, so that sort of throws a bit of a spanner in the works as well, doesn't it?
It does, and while we're speaking of a spanner in the works, I think there's another interesting story that's been floating around for a while, and that's the prospect of moving the ANZ Championship to the summertime slot. Now, from where I stand, it looks like this is only going to be a benefit to the Australian TV broadcasters.
And the media here in Australia too, Luke.
Yeah.
In general as well.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. For those of you who are Kiwi listeners or in other parts of the world, it's a bit of an interesting conundrum with the media coverage. In New Zealand, netball receives wall-to-wall coverage. The girls who play can walk down the street. They get mobbed in the supermarket no matter where they are. In Australia, it's quite different. They have to fight for column space in newspapers. There's no Australian version of Netball Zone on television here. The girls can walk down the street and go to the supermarket and not get mobbed, and no one knows who they are. Of course, you've got your hardcore, diehard fans like us, but the average person probably would have no idea who they are. And the reason why this move has been, or suggestion has been put in place, is because netball, to improve the media coverage for netball. So you're competing with less sports, and they'll get more column space in newspapers, more TV time, more everything really.
That is a very well-reasoned argument, Ben, but I think it's going to come down to if the Australian TV broadcasters have more room in their schedule over summer, and they can accommodate the ANZ Championship. One thing that I think would be an advantage would be by moving to a summer time slot. You would move away from having the ANZ Championship move in the Commonwealth Games and World Championship years in the 4-year cycle. It could basically occupy a permanent space in terms of when it's played.
And you say a permanent space, Luke. Another interesting point that came up was when the New South Wales Swifts took on the Southern Steel at the AIS Arena in Canberra on Anzac Day in what was pretty much a first. I mean, we've seen Anzac Day games staged before, but a first in it. There was a Trans-Tasman clash. One Australian team, one New Zealand team. I think it may have been Susan Prattley, or it may have been someone else that suggested having a representative game like a test match, Australia and New Zealand, in the middle of the season, like as a one-off test, like they do in rugby league. Can you see that working at all?
Not really. I think Australia and New Zealand play each other too often as it is in netball. There's a saturation of Australia and New Zealand games, Constellation Cup. This is my own personal bias is towards the ANZ Championship rather than international netball outside of Commonwealth Games and World Championship years. I certainly think a Trans-Tasman clash between ANZ Championship sides and Anzac Day. Yeah, go for that. By all means, take the ANZ Championship to non-traditional areas like Canberra. But yeah, I think in terms of international netball, the Australia and New Zealand games do risk oversaturation.
But at the same time too, it sort of would be arcing on that. Anzac spirit and all that sort of thing, just like rugby league does, and we have a representative round.
Rugby league is a different sport, though, and
It is.
there is an Australian New Zealand International Rugby League test that has been played recently, and if they could manage the Trans-Tasman round, or which has usually traditionally been in the ANZ Championship one round, where it's all the Trans-Tasman teams playing each other in the one round around Anzac Day, that would be great. I do think that interrupting the season to play one test match would be a rather silly idea. Super Rugby does that. They get to a certain point in the season and take a break for the Junior Internationals and then come back for the rest of the regular season and the finals. And I personally think it's a rather daft idea.
You say daft, you mean old-fashioned, Luke. I understand what you're saying about it only being in Commonwealth Games and World Championships, international games, but at the same time too, we need these test matches staged, even if it's international block as we usually have after the ANZ, because this is how the majority of the likes of a Netball New Zealand and Netball Australia, it's how they make their money. I mean, obviously they're part of a consortium called Trans-Tasman Netball Limited that runs the ANZ Championship, but they've got to make their money somehow. They make a lot of their money from ticket sales from tests and merchandise sales too, of the diamonds and of the silver ferns.
Well, first of all, I meant that the way Super Rugby takes a break for the Junior Internationals is a dumb idea, but that's just my opinion. Yeah, the additional tests we've seen added in over the last so many years between Australia and New Zealand have been to meet the demands of, again, the TV broadcasters, and that's just the nature of what goes on.
And ticket sales as well. As I mentioned, way to make money for NA and NZ to make money. That's how they make the majority of their money.
Oh, absolutely. But one question I will pose to you, Ben, and this is a bit of a curveball for you.
Wasn't expecting this one, listeners.
What would you rather see, a full 2-round draw in the ANZ Championship, or would you rather see the current or more tests played between Australia, New Zealand, and other countries?
I would say keep the test as is, and I would like to see a full 2-round competition of the ANZ Championship, because at the moment it sort of is not very equal, because you've got the Australian teams playing each other twice and the New Zealand teams playing and then playing against the New Zealand teams once, and then for New Zealand teams it's a reverse. So as I said, I would like to see the competition being a full 2-round competition.
But wouldn't that see the Consolation Cup being played around Christmas Day? Can you imagine it? There's people in the crowd eating turkey watching the netball.
Yeah, that would give a new meaning to corporate hospitality, wouldn't it, Luke?
Yeah, it would, and just hospitality understands.
Yeah, it would, but at the same time too, I know that there's a lot of netball fans out there. They always say once the ANZ's done, oh, there's not much on, or once the test's done, oh, there's not much on. What do you do? So it sort of might help to fill that void of there being no netball, from probably late October through until February, March. I mean, we do have the ANL competition here and the NPC in New Zealand, but other than that, there's not much else that goes on after a certain time in the year, period of time.
Well, the NPC is barely worth a mention in the context of this discussion.
I'm saying in terms of it, like we're saying what the equivalent of what we have here in Australia. We have the ANL.
Yes, but last year Netball New Zealand canned the round robin games, so it's now just played over a few days at one venue, the NPC, so you're not likely to get any netball fix from that unless you live close by to those games. But I think we also got to bear in mind there needs to be a clear cut-off season for the players as well to recuperate and work on their fitness.
And yes, Luke, because obviously as part of their contracts, there's obviously clauses in there that say they're entitled to a certain period of time off. So we don't want overworked players, do we?
No. And just before we wrap up, since I know you follow the AFL, Ben, what do you sort of think of the sort of joint relationship between St Kilda and the Pulse in terms of PR on both sides of the Tasman, promoting both teams? In other words,
I think it's a great idea seeing sports mixing together for PR, joining together, for PR purposes. And I think probably so far it's great. It's obviously given people who watch Netball Zone in New Zealand a bit of a look at AFL. And we've probably had a look at netball for those who don't necessarily follow the game here in Australia. So it's a good start anyway.
Yeah, I wish the St Kilda AFL club well in promoting sport here in New Zealand, and I hope the and your AFL game stays in Wellington for a number of years yet. So yeah, I think it's a positive thing, really. And heck, I never knew that an AFL uniform suited Capernaum Crown so well.
Yeah, I saw that. Wearing the St Kilda Saints jersey. Yeah, I saw that. Although, what about Storm Purvis in one, Luke? Ha ha ha.
Well, that could be even better, but let's not go into the way the other uniform swap duration went, the AFL player wearing the Vulture.
No, we won't. No, we won't mention that.
No, we will spare the listener if they did not see that sight. Well, is there anything you'd like to add, Ben?
I'd just like to say it's great to be back on air, and I look forward to hopefully doing many more shows with you, Luke. And remember, you can get us on info@3feetradio.com, Twitter @3feetradio, or like 3 Feet Radio on Facebook as a way of being involved in 2014. You've been listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert.